"Emma, you bring shame to our family. Please go. You're not wanted here." My father's words hit me like a slap, sharp and stinging, tearing through the festive atmosphere of my brother Tom's wedding. The humiliation washed over me, but it was Tom's silence that stung the most. His refusal to speak up, to stand by me, made it clear where his loyalties lay. Anger surged through me, boiling like lava ready to erupt. I was just about to turn and walk out, my heart pounding with fury, when a staff member rushed up to me, desperate for help. In that instant, the situation shifted. My father, so accustomed to seeing me as nothing but a failure, suddenly saw me in a new light. He had no choice but to recognize me for what I truly was, a capable, reliable professional. That realization shook him, but it also fueled something deep within me. I wasn't just Emma, the daughter he had always dismissed. I was someone who could solve problems, even if it meant putting my pride aside for a moment. Growing up in our house was never easy. My father, a stern, unyielding lawyer, favored Tom, the golden child, while I was left in the shadows. I was always striving, always trying to meet impossible standards, never quite good enough in his eyes. There was no room for mistakes or frivolous pursuits in our household. Every waking moment was devoted to lessons, studying, and achieving. Even the joy of playing outside with friends was something I was denied. My life was a constant race to meet my father's expectations, but no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. The moment I had long feared came when I failed the entrance exam for a prestigious school. My father's reaction, or lack thereof, was the final blow. His silence said it all. He had turned his attention completely to Tom, leaving me to fade into the background. My mother, ever supportive, did what she could, but the strain of being in a family that seemed to care so little for me was unbearable. I eventually left, slipping away quietly after high school, leaving behind a note for my mother. I found a job at a hotel, where I could live and work, far from the constant judgment that had shaped my childhood. There, in the rush of guests and the chaos of hotel life, I found a strange sense of freedom. For the first time, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. At the hotel, life was far from easy. "Emma, another mistake. How many times do I have to tell you? Get it together." Jack, the hotel manager, would snap at me, pushing me to improve. He was relentless in his expectations, but unlike my father, his critiques were not meant to tear me down. They were meant to help me grow. As a high school graduate thrust into the real world of hotel management, I made plenty of mistakes, but I learned from them. Jack's praise, when it came, was hard-earned, and it spurred me to work even harder. One moment, in particular, stood out. It was New Year's Day, the busiest day of the year for the hotel. After months of training, I had been entrusted to work independently. The pressure was immense, with guests pouring in for dinner, the dining hall packed to the brim, and room service orders stacking up. The chaos seemed endless, but I threw myself into it, determined to keep everything running smoothly. That's when the real disaster struck. A colleague fell ill, leaving us short-staffed. I pushed myself harder, working long into the night. Just as I thought we had made it through, disaster struck. The kitchen sink's pipe burst in the middle of the dinner rush. The water flooded the kitchen, and there was no plumber available on New Year's Day. Jack's frustration was palpable, but I couldn't stand by and let everything fall apart. Despite my lack of experience with plumbing, I made a decision. "Jack, can I try fixing the plumbing? I think I can handle it." Jack looked at me skeptically but, with no other options, reluctantly nodded. What Jack didn't know was that my science-focused high school education had given me a surprising set of practical skills, including basic plumbing knowledge. I knelt down, assessing the situation, and within half an hour, the kitchen was back in working order. The crisis was averted, and I had done it. "I did it," I exclaimed, breathless with adrenaline. Jack rushed over and turned the faucet. Water flowed freely, and the kitchen erupted into cheers. "Great job, Emma, you're my pride and joy," Jack said, his words warm and sincere. That moment, standing there amidst the chaos, knowing I had saved the day, became one of the most defining moments of my career. It was the day I realized that I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. 15 years passed, and I became fully immersed in my role as the hotel's general manager. The challenges were many, but so were the rewards. Then, one day, I received a letter from my mother, a rare communication in the years of distance that had grown between us. Tom was getting married, and she begged me to attend the wedding. Despite everything, despite the years of neglect and estrangement, I agreed. The wedding venue was nothing short of extravagant, exactly what I had expected from Tom and Dad. I arrived at the hotel, dressed in a suit I had bought for the occasion, but even as I walked through the doors, I felt out of place. I was surrounded by high society, people whose lives were defined by privilege. It was clear that Tom's bride had been chosen from a network of connections, a strategic alliance rather than a love story. As I stood in the waiting room, I felt like an outsider, observing the intricate dance of power and privilege. When I saw Dad and Tom, the unease deepened. Tom looked conflicted, and Dad's disapproval was palpable. He didn't even attempt to mask it. "Why are you here?" My father's voice boomed, cutting through the air like a blade. "Is it so wrong to celebrate Tom's wedding?" I asked, trying to diffuse the tension, but my voice felt small in comparison to his. Tom didn't respond. His silence was a knife in my side. "What have you been doing all these years? Probably some worthless job," Dad continued, his disdain so obvious it felt suffocating. "Emma, you shouldn't be here," he added, his words dripping with contempt. My mother, sensing the tension, rushed over, attempting to intervene. "Come on, Emma is here to celebrate. There's no need to be so harsh," she pleaded, but her words fell on deaf ears. Dad was having none of it. "Enough," Dad said, his voice cold and final. "Emma, you're a disgrace. I don't want you here ruining Tom's celebration. Get out." Anger surged within me, hotter than I had ever felt. I had come to this wedding out of duty to my mother, but now I was being humiliated in front of everyone. I had no intention of enduring this. "Fine, I'm leaving," I said, turning on my heel to exit. But just as I was about to leave, a voice stopped me in my tracks. "Excuse me, Emma," a staff member called out, rushing toward me with urgency in their eyes. "We have a problem. We're short on seats and food. There's an unexpected guest, and we're in a bind." I paused, my heart still pounding with anger. The staff's desperation forced me to stop and think. Despite everything, I couldn't ignore the problem. I was no longer the ignored daughter. I had a role to play, and it was time to step up. "All right, take me to Mila," I said, my voice firm, though my mind was still swirling with frustration. I turned back to face Dad, whose eyes burned with hostility. "Why are you back here?" he demanded. Mila, the wedding planner, was caught in the middle of the chaos. I approached her with a calm that surprised even me. "General Manager, I'm here to help," I said, revealing my position in the hotel chain. The shock on Dad's face was unmistakable. "I'll take care of this," I added, dismissing his disapproval with a wave of my hand. "We'll talk later." Turning to Mila, I took control of the situation. "Get the seats ready and focus on the other details. I'll handle the food," I instructed. As the tension lifted from her face, she nodded, relieved. "Understood, I'll leave the food to you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. With purpose, I walked out of the room, determined to solve the crisis at hand. I made my way to the kitchen to find Chef Jackson. I asked Chef Jackson, hoping for a quick fix to the unexpected shortage of meals. His response was as confident as always. "Sure thing, I'll whip something up with my culinary skills," he replied with a reassuring smile. "Much appreciated. I owe you dinner," I said, my voice laced with gratitude. After handling a few more loose ends, I returned to the waiting room, finding that the guests had already moved to the ceremony area. Only my parents and the bride's parents remained. As I entered, I announced the issue had been resolved, and a palpable sense of relief washed over the room. "We've got an extra meal coming," I explained, watching the tension ease from my mother's and the bride's parents' faces, but my father remained as cold as ever, his pride still evident. "Emma, thank you so much. Because of you, the celebration can go on successfully," my dad finally acknowledged, his voice carrying a surprising note of genuine gratitude. "It's all in a day's work as a general manager," I replied with a smile, trying to sound more casual than I felt. I led the way into the ceremony hall, my thoughts momentarily drifting as the lights dimmed, and the groom and bride made their entrance. Their radiant smiles seemed to light up the entire room, and I couldn't help but marvel at their happiness. The ceremony proceeded smoothly, and when it was time for the meal, I made sure everyone was served before finally allowing myself a long, relieving sigh. Once the last course was delivered and the guests were happily eating, I took a moment to engage in conversation with the bride's family. Their gratitude towards me was overwhelming. "These moments are why I love my job," I admitted sincerely, basking in their thanks. "Emma, thank you so much. We had the best day ever, all thanks to you," the bride's family gushed, their words filled with warmth. "No worries, wishing you all the happiness in the world. Thank you so much," I responded with a smile before turning to face my parents. "Emma, you did wonderfully, thank you," my mom said, pride in her eyes. Dad and Tom stood nearby, clearly wanting to speak with me. Tom was the first to apologize, offering his sincere thanks. I couldn't help but smile at his genuine expression. "As long as I could help, Tom, it's all good," I reassured him, feeling a bit lighter. I then turned to Dad, who remained silent but acknowledged me with a slight nod of gratitude. With a sense of closure, I accepted their thanks, knowing that despite all the years of tension, we had found a way to communicate today. Just then, my phone buzzed, reminding me that more work awaited me at the hotel in the next town over. Looks like more work, but hey, I enjoy it, so no complaints. "Alright, I'm off, got work to do. You two take care," I said with a chuckle, ready to dive back into the demands of my life. A small part of me felt the weight of the realization that, after today, I probably wouldn't see Tom or Dad again. With that thought lingering, I left the room, turning my back on the wedding, and headed back to my responsibilities. 3 days later, on a rare day off, I was finally able to unwind. I was sprawled across the couch, sipping a cup of coffee, letting the warmth seep into my bones. My brief moment of peace was abruptly interrupted by the doorbell's chime. Curious about who might be visiting, I made my way to the door, only to be met with Tom's unexpected presence. "Tom, what brings you here?" I asked, surprised by his appearance. "Sorry, I got your address from Mom, wanted to talk to you, Emma," Tom explained, his voice tentative, almost apologetic. I stepped aside to let him in, brushing off any concerns about the tidiness of my home. I poured him a cup of coffee, offering him the familiar comfort of our childhood home. "Thank you, smells good," he remarked, taking a slow sip. He seemed a bit uncomfortable at first, but after a moment, he looked me in the eyes and then began to speak. "I'm really sorry for everything," he said, his voice soft yet sincere. His words caught me off guard, and I paused, struggling to understand what prompted him to come all the way over here just to apologize. For the longest time, it had felt like there had always been a wall between us, a wall I didn't know how to break down. "Hey, it's all right, Tom," I reassured him, trying to offer comfort. But Tom wasn't finished. With a vulnerability I hadn't expected from him, he continued. "You might think I'm the older brother who can do anything, but I envy you, Emma," he confessed, his words hanging in the air like an unexpected confession. I blinked, stunned. Silence stretched between us as I tried to process his revelation. "I had no idea you felt that way, Tom," I said, my voice softer than I intended. Guilt crept in, gnawing at me for not realizing sooner that he had been struggling too. "That's just it, it's not your fault, Emma," he reassured me, giving me a weak smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. But in that moment, something shifted. His words seemed to bridge the gap between us, and a new understanding was born. "Tom, I'm sorry I never considered that you were struggling too," I said, my voice filled with regret. His smile, though faint, was more genuine than I had seen in years. "We've both had our share of struggles, haven't we?" Tom said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "Yeah," I replied softly, my heart aching for all the years of misunderstanding. "I think I've been through a lot too, Tom. I didn't always see it, but breaking away from our parents and becoming independent, it wasn't easy." Tom nodded, his face reflecting his own quiet battles. We had both been struggling, just in different ways, but for the first time, it felt like we were on the same page. "I think you should do what you really want to do, Tom, without worrying about Dad," I suggested, hoping that my words might help him, just as he had helped me by sharing his truth. Tom seemed to consider it for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right, Emma, you've really helped me clear up some of my inner turmoil. Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "No, thank you, Tom, for coming over," I said sincerely, walking him to the door as he promised to return for another coffee soon. A month later, I received a letter from Tom. He had made the difficult decision to leave his career as a lawyer behind to pursue his passion for glass craftsmanship. Despite facing disapproval from Dad, Tom found solace in the support of his wife, and for the first time in years, he seemed at peace with his choice. As I reflected on Tom's journey and our evolving relationship, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in how far we had come. The sound of my phone alarm jolted me back to reality, signaling the start of another busy day at the hotel. It was time to embrace the challenges ahead, but this time, I knew I wasn't alone. I had gained a deeper understanding of myself and my family, and that knowledge would carry me forward as I faced whatever came next.